There's something I see practitioners do when they don't feel confident in the room. They go and learn something else, another technique, another modality, another certification, another set of tools to add to the ever expanding toolbox. And sometimes more training is absolutely the right answer. But quite often, I don't think you need another tool. I think you need to know what to do with the ones you already have, because you can have 20 billion brilliant techniques at your disposal and still find yourself sitting opposite a client thinking, ooh, where do I start with this one? Where am I going to take it? Is it safe to go there yet? Do I just follow this thing that's just come up, or are they just going to get overwhelmed? Do I keep tapping? Do I stop? Do I need to ask a powerful question? And what on earth do I do now? Because we've only got 8 minutes left and they've just started crying. That isn't necessarily a lack of training. It can be a lack of session architecture. If we haven't met before, I'm Emma Starling. I train and certify practitioners in trauma sensitive somatic EFT and soul shift. And one of the things I care about enormously is session craft, not just what techniques you know, but how you actually hold a session from the very moment that somebody arrives to the moment they leave. Because a good technique doesn't automatically create a good session. I think this is one of the reasons that practitioners can end up collecting modalities. They've trained, they know their stuff. They've got the certificates and the receipts, but they still don't quite feel confident when there's a real human being sitting opposite them. So they assume that there must be something else that they need to learn, maybe another modality to fill the gap. And sometimes that will be true. But before you spend another £1,000 on another certification, I'd look at something much simpler. Do you have a framework for your sessions? Do you know what you're doing at the beginning, middle, and end? Do you have tools that will minimize re traumatization from the get go? And more importantly, do you understand why you do that? Because I don't want my practitioners just knowing a collection of EFT techniques. I used to teach it that way, but I want them to know how to read the room, how to read the body, how to read the nervous system and know when to move, know when not to move and go any deeper, to know when something that looks like resistance might actually be protection. And that getting there quickly is not necessarily the same thing as getting there well. This is why I created the Somatic Safety Framework. And there's a quote that's often attributed to Abraham Lincoln that I've used for years to explain the thinking behind it. He was supposed to have said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first four sharpening the axe. That's exactly what the Somatic Safety Framework was created to do. Because so much of therapeutic work can be focused on chopping down the tree, getting to the problem, finding the trauma, clearing the belief, shifting the emotion, getting the result. And I absolutely want the shift for the client as well. I'm a root cause person. I don't want to spend months working at the surface of something when we can work at what's actually driving it. But I don't want to start swinging the axe at a nervous system that doesn't even feel safe enough to be in the room yet. I want to sharpen that axe first, and that's why something else is really important about this framework that I've created. There's 5 stages. There's safety, soothe, sneak up, shift, and stabilize. And look at where shift is in that. It's number 4. It's not number 1. There are 3 stages that happen before we even get to the deep shift work. Not because I want sessions to take ages or clients to spend more money with me, quite the contrary. I found that when we create enough felt safety at the front end of a session, we often make the shift part a lot easier. Less resistance, less overwhelm, less chance of re-traumatization, dissociation. And it means that we're not wasting time before we actually get to the work, leaving the 55-minute blowout a very real risk. We're sharpening the axe so that we can do the work. So let me show you what those 5 stages look like. The first S is safety. So before we go anywhere near anything else, I want to establish somewhat of a felt sense of safety. So we ground, we orient to the room, and we install a safe place in the client's mind that they can go to if they start to feel emotionally overwhelmed at any point during the session. I want those resources available before we need them, hoping that we don't. Not once somebody is already activated highly and we're desperately trying to bring them back. We do it first. And it can be tempting to think, well, we've only got an hour, we need to get on with this. this is the work. Because if it can help that nervous system feel safe at the beginning, then you're creating the conditions that make everything else that come after that a lot easier. So you're not wasting time. You're reducing the likelihood that you're going to spend the rest of the session firefighting protection, resistance, and parts because we went too far too quick. Then we move into soothe. So again, we're still not diving into the problem. I use my decompression method, which is working with physical sensations. Not only does it avoid the emotional stuff, but it keeps the client in the body and it helps to get them grounded. Okay. It brings the client into the body without asking them to go anywhere near difficult emotions or upsetting events yet. What can you feel? Where can you feel it? What do you notice about that feeling? We're building connection with each other and them with their own bodies, right? And we're grounding the system even further because, again, I'll say this every time, the body never lies. And I want the client to be able to notice what their body is communicating. And sometimes people have spent an entire lifetime suppressing that, being cut off from that. So I want them to be able to notice what the body is communicating without having to become so consumed by the story attached to it. And notice how different that is from somebody walking into a room and within a few minutes being asked to tell me all about the worst thing that's ever happened. What's going on? We haven't needed to do that here. We've created safety and we've soothed. We've started building a relationship with the body. So step 3 then becomes sneak up. Now, that's an existing EFT term. So we're not sneaking around, we're not doing anything nefarious. But this is where we use Taylor's trauma. So now we're beginning to approach the issue, but we're still maintaining a safe distance from it, right? I don't need the client to tell me the whole story even. I don't even necessarily want them to. We can ask them to guess at the intensity of the issue without even going into any details about it. And we can give them a way to kind of put it behind a curtain and keep it out of sight, out of mind. And then we can use a deliberately vague movie title, if you like, or a phrase that describes what's going on without actually being the actual wording as the reminder phrase for when we're tapping. So we know what we're working with, but we don't have to throw the nervous system into the middle of the memory to be able to work with it. And that distance matters because there's a very big difference between being aware of something happening and being plunged back into the experience of it. Again, stress response comes straight back up. And if it's already very intense, the likelihood is emotional overwhelm, abreaction, dissociation, zoning out, right? It doesn't work. So I want enough connection to work with what's there, but enough distance for the nervous system to recognize that it is not happening again right now. Okay. And only after we've done safety, soothe, and sneak up do we get to step 4, which is shift. Now we do the deeper change work. The method I primarily recommend and teach here is my mind body method, but it doesn't have to be that. The technique depends on what we're working with in that portion of the session. So if we're working with limiting beliefs, we might use a tabletop tool. If there's an upsetting memory that we need to work with, we might use the movie technique. There are different EFT tools available to us, and that's precisely why I don't want practitioners becoming obsessed with collecting more and more and more tools, because the question isn't what technique do I do now? It's what's happening with this person? What are we working with? And what's the appropriate tool for this point in the session? That is session craft. The framework isn't replacing your techniques. Even at step 4, you could bring in something else that you do, like breathwork or psychotherapeutic coaching or REBT or something else, right? So we're not replacing your techniques. It tells you where your techniques belong. And because we've sharpened the axe at the front end of the session, quite often step 4 shift becomes so much easier. We've already created the felt safety, we've grounded the client, we've brought them into connection with their bodies, we've approached the issue from a safe distance. We haven't asked the nervous system to go from 0 to the deepest trauma in 10 minutes flat. So now we can do the shift work from a very different place. But the session still isn't finished because there's a 5th S. And I think this one actually gets missed far too often. It's called StabiliSe in my framework, and I always want time at the end of a session for this. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, just 3 to 4 tapping rounds. And at this point, we then focus on what feels different, what feels more spacious, what's changed, what do they notice, what have they learned, what insights have come up, what are they seeing or thinking about differently? Is there more of a feeling of choice and agency? Do they feel more of a sense of safety? What does their body notice now that it couldn't notice at the beginning? Again, we're giving the nervous system time to register what's happened at the front part of the session, and we're bringing the session to a proper close, leaving them resourced, calm, and ready to go about their day. Because I don't want that 55-minute blowout that we talked about in the last video. You know, the one you've got an hour, you follow something enormous comes up, the client isn't resourced enough, and at 55 minutes, they start to cry, and you've got 5 or 10 minutes left, unless you can extend the session. And now somehow you've got to get them back into a state where they can walk out of your Zoom room or your therapy room and carry on with their day like they're fine. I don't want to practice like that, and I'm sure you don't either. And I certainly don't want to train practitioners to practice like that. The end of a session matters. I want clients leaving contained, resourced, calm. And that doesn't mean every issue has been completely resolved. And I'll do another video on that at some point as well, trying to race to zero or get the issue fixed, because that's not our job. It doesn't mean we've tied their entire life up in a beautiful bow in 60 minutes. It's likely that there's more work still to do, but they need to be able to leave the session and go back into their lives, drive home, pick the kids up, go to work, make dinner, walk the dog, be a human, right? They shouldn't need 3 days to recover from a therapy session. So those are the 5 stages of my somatic safety framework: safety, soothe, sneak up, shift, and stabilize. And it's a really, really effective way to work. Now, none of this is designed to be a rigid script like everything I do. I don't want people thinking, right, Emma says I've done 7 minutes of safety, so now I've got to do this. It's not like that. You still have a human being sitting opposite you, and you also still have your intuition that you can rely on. The framework gives you the architecture. Your attunement tells you how to move through it, right? One client might need much more safety and grounding. Another might be very naturally able to move through that session quickly. Something might happen during shift that tells you that you need to go back and create more distance again. Fine, go back and do that. This is not a conveyor belt, and the nervous system sets the pace. And I think that distinction is really important, because I don't want the somatic safety framework to become another tool that somebody just adds to a folder full of tools. It is the structure that holds the tools. There's a difference. You can know 20 techniques. You can have 6 or 60 certifications. You can have manuals everywhere. You can be a 25-year therapist. But if you don't know how to safely sequence a session, how to establish safety in the client, how to approach difficult material without plunging someone into it, how to choose the appropriate intervention, and how to bring them safely back out of the work, then another technique might not be the thing that you're missing. And I would rather have a practitioner with fewer tools that they know inside and out, working within a framework that they understand and trust, than somebody with a toolbox bursting at the seams who freezes when the session doesn't go according to plan. Because confidence doesn't come from knowing exactly what's going to happen. You can't. Humans don't work like that. For me, practitioner confidence comes from knowing that when something unexpected happens, you have an architecture that helps you work out what might happen next and where to go. So if you're looking at another certification because there's a part of you that still doesn't feel confident in the room, I'd ask you to ask yourself this before you buy it. Am I genuinely missing a therapeutic tool? And if you are, cool. Or am I missing the framework that tells me how to use the tools I already have? Because those are very different problems. And perhaps you don't need another axe. Perhaps you need to spend more time sharpening the one that you've already got. So in the next video, I'm going to take this into a very specific moment that can happen in a session. Your client suddenly shuts down, they go quiet, you feel like you've lost them. And now you need to decide what to do next. So I'll show you what I'm looking for in that moment and how I respond without pushing a client any further into overwhelm. So if you're an EFT practitioner or you use it in your sessions or even with yourself, Or if you're a therapist, coach, or healer, and you want to get better at the art of actually holding these sessions, subscribe and stay with me.